Hey folks, welcome back. It's Sunday, which means it's stream time. I apologize for running a little bit late this morning. Had some technical difficulties, but all is well. Looks like we already have a good number of folks here. We got GM Cody, we got Seraphis, we got Dirty History and Hobbies, Grumpy Old Slan, Mage's Musings, RPG Dad, and I'm sure there are more of you, but welcome. All right, so what are we talking about today? We are talking about what's the best tabletop RPG. And some of you have kind of beat me to the punch, but honestly, the anticlimactic answer to that is, honestly, it's the one that you enjoy playing. I mean, that is the simple answer to that question, but I wanted to go into a couple of things about that. I mean, there is a lot of talk in the hobby, always grousing back and forth over what game is better and what game is the best and which game does what better. And so over the weekend, which is not quite over yet, but hey, Hunger, I did have a chance to kind of chat, and Coco, welcome. Let's see. My brother and I were talking about this, and it came up to really a matter of really looking at game styles and what they, what they do for different people and how they play out. And really, there is no actual best game. You are really reaching if you try to claim that a particular game is the best game, because everything's subjective. People enjoy things in different ways. And different games present themselves in different ways. Some games are very specific to a theme and therefore might do that theme really well, but don't do anything else very well. Some games are good for a particular theme, but they don't give the players a lot of tools that instruct them or guide them in how to play that theme. As my brother was putting it, there are games that are kind of designed for people who are already into the thing and therefore don't require a lot of instruction. Good example of that would be Marvel Superheroes, the old face rip system. Great game, but if you're not a comic book person, you're probably not going to get the gist of that system as much as somebody who is. There are other games, however, that might have a lot more mechanical parts that guide you in how to play, and therefore they can help you, as somebody who might not be into the particular genre, play that genre. But yeah, I don't want to get too far off the main point. Morning, John. Welcome, geek. Let's see. So, really, what it comes down to is the best game for you is the game that you want to play. If you are playing games that you're not particularly a fan of, there's still some merit to that, but it's not going to be your best game. You can certainly take some steps to get to that place, but I really think that if you are having fun, the game you're having the most fun with is the best game for you. I would say there may be some objectively bad games out there. In fact, I can say that there absolutely are some objectively bad games, but those are just bad games. It doesn't make them the best or the worst. They're just bad. I've mentioned it before. Universe is a RPG that I bought a copy, and now I keep it because it is just an absolute train wreck of intense effort. There's a lot going on and that went into this rule book, but by the end of the rule book, I still don't have any way to really play the game. All the tools to play the game are there, but there's nothing. The game, the core book doesn't give you anything to make it workable for you to run the game. You end up with like an 11-page character sheet, which has every little nuance of your character figured out: blood type, cross compatibility with species, a damage tracker for both physical damage as well as fatigue. You have oxygen level on there. You have a psychic damage chart that actually tracks specific psychic damage types by chakra points. It's a whole bunch of like really cool systems. And at the end, you still don't have enough to play. There's no sample monsters in there. There's no NPCs. There's no pre-made vehicles. There's nothing in the main book to give you the tools to play the game. So again, that would be an example in my mind, at least of an objectively bad game. Morning, Cal. If you're talking about miniatures games, I would say they're good. I do like some rank and flank games as well. Let's see. But so long and the short of it, the best game is the game that you're playing. Now that said, I also think there's something to be said for playing games that you can play. Going off from the kind of admittedly clickbaity title, when it comes to playing games, and getting if you're avoiding getting wound up in what's the best game, there's something to be said for just playing the games that you can play. You can hold out to play the game that you really, really want to play, but it doesn't do you any good if that opportunity never presents itself. And so you may want to just try playing whatever you can find, or whatever game you can find, and whatever, not that you have to settle for anything, but if you've got an A, B, and a C on your list, or a rated 1 through 10 of your favorite games or most interesting games, maybe you can't find your number 1 and number 2, but if you can find your 3 or 4, you can get some gaming going, and you're still gaming. You're having fun still, hopefully. You're meeting people to game with, and you're getting to practice those gaming skills that you will ultimately, hopefully, be able to put to use when you're able to finally get to your number 1, number 2. Honestly, I don't believe this, and for many reasons. A lot of people are incredibly blind to the problems inherent in their self-published or self-written games. And I'm kind of like you. I've started a lot of projects and often peter out. Part of that's the ADHD, but also part of it is just eventually I become very aware that I'm either in over my head or well into the weeds, or what I thought was a cool concept is actually not. The act of gaming, the act of playing a game, is really just good to do. It's so. I mean, if you can't get to your favorite game, your best game, then play something that's on your list that you want to play. I would even say go ahead and put yourself out there and maybe play a game that you haven't considered. There's so many games out there. There was a time when I kind of knew and could honestly say without too much of a stretch that I had played just about everything that was out. That was a long time ago, pre-internet, before we ended up with 5 new games every Tuesday. But at the same time, I still find games that I have never played or I didn't even know about. A lot of times there are variations on a theme. I mean, nowadays, with like the OSR, for example, it's become the Taco Bell of RPGs, it's the same ingredients, just remixed in different combinations. It's still delicious and it's still amazing, and you ultimately always find yourself back. But is it anything new and amazing? Generally not. But there are lots of little games out there that are still worth trying and are fun. You know, and for example, I'm still trying to wait, or not wait, but I'm still trying to find somebody who can really convince me that Powered by the Apocalypse games are actually worth my time. I've played a few and never been satisfied, but I have tried them. Uh, at 3 a.m. when you're hungry, yes, Taco Bell has its place, man. Um, so, um, the besides playing the game that you can play, and by that I mean like just game. Getting in with a group and playing a game that may not necessarily be your number one, and still getting a chance to play it, building up those relationships with other gamers, building up those friendships and that camaraderie, establishing yourself within a gaming group, a gaming community. It's worthwhile, and ultimately leads is a good way to lead towards getting to play the game that you want, your best game, your favorite game. And so, to that end, I would say give a little to get a lot is kind of the way I always put it. You're maybe not, you're going to bend a bit and play things that you might not normally play, but what you're going to get out of that is hopefully, and in most cases, in my experience, opportunities to play things that you want to play, and discovering new things that you may not have considered. There are games that I have not wanted to play or not known about, and then ultimately played them and then wanted to play more of them. Board games mostly because that was my gaming group back home was very board game heavy, and so there were so many games, and there were a lot of games where I'm just like, never. That is not something I would have gravitated towards, but then you play it and it's amazing, and next thing you know, you just want to keep playing. But let's see. Top 10 RPGs that are favorites, but I wouldn't rank them 10. Yeah, I mean, I think for the sake of the discussion, that's what I'm talking about. Your top 10. I don't expect that most people really actually have them properly ranked. I just don't feel that that's a worthwhile endeavor. Your mileage may vary. Let's see. Yeah, keep it up, and he's just gonna stop playing. um, let's see. Looking at a couple comments here. Yeah, Dragon Main is interesting. Although I will say, I have to agree with the one take on it that I heard that their magic system is a little convoluted. It's trying to do too many things all at once. But other than that, so so another thing in the time, I mean, if we're talking about like getting into games and kind of growing as a gamer and getting around to being able to play the game that you really want to play, I would say time honored advice: run the game that you want to play. If you're really jazzed on a game, offer to run it. Uh, First of all, if you are super enthusiastic about it and you really dig the game, you running the game is likely to spread that enthusiasm and that zeal for the game, um, to your other players. and might ultimately result in somebody getting jazzed enough to want to run it themselves. Uh, this is how a lot of folks, myself included, their D&D experience came around. You know, they ran D&D because they wanted to play D&D and D, and they were the only person they knew who had the rules, or they played in somebody's game. This is how my experience happened. I played with somebody and then discovered that I really, really wanted to run the game. The idea of being a game master really appealed to me, and from there I was hooked. And I've always been hooked as a GM. I would say I prefer the GM seat to being a player. I do enjoy playing, but my real happy space is as a GM. Well, you always want to have that guy. So this is the thing. Now that I'm almost out of points, and actually this kind of feeds into my last point here. Gaming should be fun. It's not really. It shouldn't be a life choice. And this kind of brings it back to the whole argument of what's the best game, and getting all bent out of shape over editions and all that. The fact of the matter is, these are games that are supposed to be played for entertainment, and we really shouldn't get too wound up in. We shouldn't wind too much of ourself up into these games, because that just leads down a slippery slope of dissatisfaction and unhappiness, and to the point where it becomes, confrontational and competitive and just generally antagonistic and, kind of sinking slow. To what Geek was saying here, I think every group has this player and benefits from having this player. Even if they're not necessarily the best player, having an enthusiastic player who is willing to poke and prod the thing in the game is super important. It's always such a help. The other thing that you want that is good to have in your group is the player who will play anything, who just wants to play a game. I am lucky enough that at least in terms of my 5e lineup, I have both. I have one buddy who absolutely is going to touch or poke the thing. It's going to go. He's going to explore. It's got to head where he shouldn't. RPG Exile, welcome. How's it going? All right, and then let's see. I think we had. No, he's the last one to sneak in. It's actually slipped in, but I already commented to him. So the other player, of course, is the guy who will play everything, and I have one of those too. It is so good to have somebody who can sit there and say, I want to run a game, and they're just like, I'm in. These are the players who are willing to bend with the system, learn new systems, who are really excited to make new characters, who are just wanting to play. And I mean, they're not always the best player, or even if they are, say, a good role player, they may have other habits and stuff. But the fact of the matter is that everybody has those things. We're all people. No. See, we're not all you. We're not all you, Mage. uh, but all right, guys. No, this is actually it's funny. I mean, a totally different subject. I always get kind of amused when people want to get bent out of shape over dice rolls to solve puzzles and problems, but we don't insist that people actually pull out swords and prove that they can be a fighter either, or actually pick a lock. Um, Video games actually make you pick a lock nowadays, which is kind of funny. But that's kind of cool. Anyways, this is kind of a lightweight topic for today. I just, again, one of those topics where I had some things to say. One of these days, I'm just going to learn that I should just turn these into like short 15-minute videos. But I like having folks here. And so far, I can't seem to find time in my I won't say busy schedule. I will say uh, cluttered, haphazard, and absolutely disorganized schedule to get those one off non streamed episodes made very frequently, at least. Um, the Yeah, so I mean, really, it's one of those lightweight topics, but I think it deserves saying that really, ultimately, the game that is the best game for you, or the best game in general, is the game that you get to play, the game that you enjoy playing, um, and that's it. I mean, it's really just 2 points. If you're don't play things that you're not having fun with, but I'll absolutely give them a try. Don't avoid a game because it seems odd. Try it out. Um, hey, Logan. So yeah, it's you don't have to keep playing. You're not obligated to play a game. That's the other thing too. Is like if you get with a group and you don't mesh with the group, um, cool. Also, don't set yourself up for failure. I read a really weird post on an old men who play D&D group on Facebook, and this guy was like going off about you know he doesn't allow smoke breaks at his games, and uh, if you smoke, if you smoke and you want to come to it, you just don't bother coming to his game and all that. And I'm like, why is this even a thing for you? Because if you're that sensitive to smoke, because I absolutely understand that people have sensitivities to smoke and don't have odor issues and stuff like that. Well, that's fine. Then just make sure that it's very clear up front that you're a no smoking, no smokers gaming group. Why is it even a thing? Why set yourself up for failure? Why would you? Because the way he phrased it out, like he would actually invite people who smoked to his games, even though he's that adamant about smoking. All right. So, yes, Mechhead Studios would be Jason. That is awesome. I'm super glad that you found a local group willing to try your stuff. I'm hoping that that holds for you. I know that you have had some really bad luck trying to get a group together locally. Uh, well, I mean, yeah, I mean, if your group is amenable to that, that's fine. Um, you know, but if you're that, I guess my point is, if you're that adamant against about it, why are you even bothering to have people over who smoke? Um, I don't I don't let people smoke in my house either. But at the same time, I don't have super sensitivities to the odor of nicotine or pot if that's your thing. But yeah, I'm not. So if you want to go outside and have smoke, that's fine. I'm not going to. It's not going to bother me. That's just an example. There's like people of there have other people who are like, oh, don't bring stinky food to game. Okay, well, that's an easy one. Don't bring stinky food to game. Getting bent out of shape because somebody actually, your host especially, who is usually your GM, has limitations or constraints on their space. That's a thing. Like, if it and the list goes on. If it's a dog house and there's dog hair everywhere, and you as a player have a problem with dogs, well, tough shit. You don't get to play with that group then if it's not going to be that big of a deal with you. I had a friend who had a severe cat allergy, but rather than make a big deal about it, he just would take a lot of allergy medicine and play a little dopey because he wanted to play, and he didn't want to be a dick. He wasn't expecting anybody to, vacuum their house top to bottom and get, absolutely deep catify it. No, he's just going to be cool. And he was going to take personal responsibility for his issue. But I think you also have to respect your host and the space and the other gamers in the room. People have allergies, people have sensitivities to things. People have all sorts of reasons for that. But, And if you can pull that off, that's cool. I mean, again, it is your table, and you play the games that you're happy playing, and you play them in the ways that you're happy playing with the group that you're happy playing with. Um, let's see. Yeah, I mean, I've played at game stores and stuff too, and guys that step outside and have smoke breaks, and when I have a yard, and so I mean, if you want to go outside and smoke, that's fine. I don't care. Um, as far as like food smells, you when we were gaming in person at my house, it varied day to day. We did potluck style, so some weeks I might make a curry, some weeks I might make a spaghetti, some weeks I might grill. You know, People were cool about it, but again, I this is the other thing I always get. I feel like I have to clarify nowadays. I almost never play with strangers. Um, I have been lucky enough to constantly have a group of players in my life that are also friends. And so it's a lot easier to do and to ask for things, I think, with people that you really know really well. So, let's see. Yeah, I mean, if you're using somebody else's space, if you're a third party space, well, that's their rules: game store, library, rec center, school, um, it church. Um, yeah, yeah. It's funny. We never really did. I mean, the worst that ever really that happened for me was I had a couple of stoner friends who would have to they would every so often go out and roast a bull, but it's and if people did smoke, they weren't smoking while we were gaming in houses because it was usually. I mean, even it's weird because like I remember my parents used to smoke in the house because child of the '80s, but my friends' parents didn't, even though they smoked. So it's personal choice. I don't want to spend too much time on that because that wasn't the point. Um, so yeah, I mean, other than that, I mean, what's to be said? I mean, play what you want to play the games you love the games that you love. Don't feel obligated to like a game because somebody tells you to. But at the same time, get get a say, stop like trying to draw lines on in the sand of best and worst, and just realize that like people do things for fun, and they play the things that they play because they want to have fun, and that's ultimately the biggest thing. It's not weird. I mean, so I mean, I have vegan friends. My vegan friends aren't jerk vegans, but if you are philosophically opposed to something, an odor that reminds you of that can elicit a negative response. And if you're trying to be in a happy place playing a game and you're vegan and somebody's chowing down on a steak right in front of you, or if you're out to dinner, I can get it. You know, I don't agree with it. I have vegan from my vegan friends are not militant vegans. Most of them are vegan by diet, not by philosophy. Um, so, but the same could be said. For example, you get the same thing with people who want to freak out because you're eating Indian food in the office or really pungent Filipino food or something like that. It's the same thing. Going back to the smoking thing, I've known people who are still very tied up in pot bad, weed bad, and if you smell of it, they are absolutely convinced that you're a bad person, or it reminds them of something bad. So I think the vegan thing is no more difficult to understand than anything else. We all have our baggage. We all carry with us connections and connotations. I will say this, like I currently live in a state where weed is legal. I used to live in a state where weed is legal and has been for some time. I grew up very straight laced, and while I had lots of stoner friends, I never even tried this stuff. And my parents and the adults in my life were very drug and alcohol, you know, and for me, I grew up with a lot of negative connotations to that. And so when it became legal in my state, I had to deal with it a lot more suddenly because people were suddenly a little more free. It took me a while before I got to the point where I was okay with it and actually learning more about what was going on and stuff, because but I had some baggage. I don't have it anymore. I still don't try, I still don't partake, but that's just a choice. I figure I'm 50 some odd years old. Why start now? It's never been a thing. Why make it a thing now? Um, but I am the child of alcoholics, and so I don't drink very heavily. Um, we all have our thing. It's and I think bringing it back to gaming, we all have our things when it comes to gaming. We have our preferences. A good example in my mind, and this is one you hear all the time: the pineapple on pizza argument. Some people get so militant over pineapple on pizza. Now, for a lot of people, it's just a meme, and they really actually don't care. But there are people who legitimately get butthurt. I actually had a friend who got kicked out of a pizzeria once for asking for pineapple, like forcibly ejected. And now, granted, he was being a dick, but gaming is kind of like that. You like the combinations that you like. Some combinations are great. You may not like them. I hate the idea of fish on a pizza. People love a lot of people love anchovies. You know, but I'm not going to tell somebody that that is wrong, that it is blasphemous, or you're wrong if you like that. You just don't. I just don't like it. You don't like. You like it. Great. That's your choice, your taste. It doesn't hurt me. And the fact of the matter is, I know anchovies in many things that I actually like. So I can't even say that anchovies are universally bad. I like Caesar salad. I like Worcestershire sauce. And I know I just mispronounced that. Worcestershire sauce, Worcestershire, Worcestershire sauce, whatever. But, you know, enjoy it. Like um, almost anything Asian has some sort of fish sauce in it. You know, or fish ingredient in it. Even if you're not a fish person, unless you have an allergy, you're probably enjoying fish by proxy. Uh, let's see. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, I think the key there is heavy, because the fact of the matter is that a lot of people are perfectly able to control their intake. Um, so yeah, um, it's that comes down to basic self control and behavior. You could argue that you know the same is for content or general behaviors at the table. Maybe people are a little too lewd in mixed company where you might have younger kids at the table. Maybe some people are overly sexual and even in a group of adults, and they're like, and they just make you feel comfortable. We might have that one player who's too killy and really, really wants to get into the nuts and bolts and the nitty gritty of how he's twisting the blade, whatever. Again, there's those levels of control. Let's see. Yeah, it all comes down to sweet and savory. I mean, if you don't like sweet and savory mixed together, well, then it's not for you. The fact that it's on menus across the world and keeps selling indicates that there is some merit to it. You'd have to convince me on that one. I don't like salmon anyways, which is kind of ironic considering I come from one of the most salmon-y places in the country, the Pacific Northwest. I am not a salmon person. Smoked salmon, yes. Lox, yes, but not like fresh salmon. It does not sit well with me. I'm more of a halibut, cod kind of a guy when it comes to fishes. There's a great place in Seattle on the waterfront. They do all their smoked halibut steaks, and you just get them walking down the street. Basket full of fries and a big old halibut steak smoked over alderwood. Super delicious. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's the thing. I mean, if you're showing up to a game and you're not following the decorum set by the group, or maybe by the GM, by the host, you're out, and it's your own fault. You probably have been told. You've probably been warned. If you can't keep it together, then it's on you. That's a good one. What's this here sauce? Well, yeah, that's just basic logic. You're an island with lots of mountains. Um, yeah, you're gonna be a sea based culture. So let's see. Well, that's an interesting twist. Most people, so you were uninvited to games because the group was into drinking or weed smoking so much. So that is weird because, like, growing up, I used to get invited to a lot of parties and social gatherings because people thought I was a stoner because a lot of my friends were, and I had the long hair and I was into metal and all that. Obviously, I must be a stoner, right? And the general consensus was, if you said no, not for me, there's like, cool, more for me. So it's weird that they would uninvite you because you didn't want to partake unless you were making a deal out of it. I'm not saying you were. That just seems weird. That's contrary to my experiences. Most people are usually cool with you not. Um, and if they're not cool with you not, then that's a hang up on their part. Like, clearly it means way too much for them if that's, you're not one of us, you must go. Uh, uh, um, hey, Brian, welcome. Uh, yeah, there's lewd and then there's lewd. There's like comedically lewd and then there's actually lewd. So, let's see. This is also my wife's pizza, pineapple, pepperoni, and jalapeno. Let's see. Yes, and this is a limit that players should respect. It's and you have it set for a reason. Um, it is. And I not to do this particular topic to death, but I think that's respecting table limits and table rules is universal gaming etiquette. That's just how it is. One of the best pineapple pizzas I ever had was actually done with a barbecue sauce instead of marinara. It was done with red onions that were really good. Um, and then they called it a Hawaiian barbecue pizza. But yeah, it was really good pizza. Of course, I've also had a pizza with white sauce and walnuts on it. So it had like walnuts and zucchini and stuff like that. It was actually a really good pizza. Very gourmet, but it was still pretty good. I'm pretty open when it comes to pizza. I usually have about 5 of them in my freezer, and they have a good. One of the advantages of moving to this state was I was amazed at the variety of frozen pizzas and the quality of the frozen pizzas that were available in the supermarket here. Uh, let's see. Yeah, I mean, we would in my gaming groups often have like a bottle of mead that would be opened up around the table, or some ciders or beers or whatever, and that's fine. Nobody was getting drunk. We were just It was adult beverages for an adult game. And even with my teenagers there, I would drink. I don't drink heavily, but I do drink every so often. I drink for the taste of things, and they didn't care. You know, um, and I didn't feel like I was being a bad influence. I know my kids. Trust me, in their teens, they've already tried alcohol, and the less mysterious and taboo I can make it, the better it is for them. I feel that is also why when they got caught drinking in the vacant house down the block, my kids came up to me and said, "Hey, mom, dad, you may get a visit from the cops." I'm like, "Oh, really? Why is that?" And they told me, and they told me the whole thing. So when you have kids that are like that, I'm like, "All right, I'm okay." Uh, let's see. Let's see. Going down the list here. And we're over 21 people watching today. I think that's a set channel record. That is amazing. I've been consistently gaining um, new subscribers, which is cool. I'm moving on towards 300, which is not anything to brag about as far as YouTube goes, but for me, and as little action, as little effort as I actually put into my channel, it's kind of amazing. Let's see. Yeah, yeah. That's literally, I got invited to friends' birthday parties because they thought I smoked pot, and we get out into the woods, and they'd be passing around. I'm like, no, man. Oh, really? I thought you did. All right, more for me. All right, cool. Um, it's funny. One of the main reasons I don't want this at my gaming table is I don't want my shit getting messed up because somebody gets drunk and spills a bottle of booze all over my gaming books, or my miniatures or whatever. I mean, I've had food accidents, legit accidents at the table, and that happens, and it's unfortunate. But if you're going to eat at your table while you're gaming, it's a thing. I've got my ancient original AD&D DMG has some Coca-Cola stains on it. It has a couple of orange juice stains on it. It's got a lot of stains from being dropped in a muddy ditch one night, but it's still holding together. Let's see. Yeah, I think this is again, this is, to repeat, that's the key thing. I mean, I have a particular sensitivity to smoke. It triggers allergic reactions, even if I'm not allergic to them. Um, because I have respiratory issues, it's a thing. So I don't like it in and around my house. Um, you know, we were pretty open in my house when it came to like, like I knew my kids smoked pot, and my thing was like not around me. you know, um, and they respected that. Um, so um, let's see. Part of this is being pretty level when it comes to that stuff. I learned some lessons from my mother when I was growing up. To be honest, if we can go back to the Wayback Machine and talk some personal stuff, like a lot of kids, I got busted for shoplifting, and when I got driven home by the cop in the back of the car, and I was freaking out because I was young and way too much of a goody two shoes. And after the cop leaves, my mom just looks at me and says, "Shoplifting. Gonna do it again?" I'm like, "No." So all right, we're done. And I'm like, "What? I'm not in trouble." She's like, "Look, we do it. It's part of growing up as a kid. I did it. Your stepdad did it. Just don't do it again. If you do it again, we'll have a problem." And that stuck with me. You know, because she didn't freak out about it and because she was cool about it, I really felt more of an obligation to try and live up to that trust and that understanding. And I have a gnat flying around and showing up on camera, so I apologize. My little friend, it's my familiar. Um, it's the problem with being in the basement where I have a sump drain. Is sometimes you end up with sump flies. Yay! Um, yeah, this is a don't. Yeah, don't. There's a certain point where the game ends. Yeah, Sunday mornings. This is why I do it on Sunday mornings because I don't have. So I have Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday off right now. That I may have to shift everything soon. My department is going through its first full shift realignment in 3 years, and there's no guarantee I'm going to get the same shift that I have now, which is super freaking annoying. Um, because we either have a front half of the week or a back half of the week, and you only get one weekend day off. So my entire gaming schedule is going to have to realign if I can't get the same days off. Yay me. Um, let's see. This, yes, you want to really get yourself excised from my gaming group or my hobby group or just general friendship. Be callous when it comes to damaging my stuff. Not the same thing as the gaming accidents, but I used to. I am a casual comics enthusiast. I'm not a comics collector. I don't have like whole runs and I don't keep my comics pristine, but I do try to keep them in relatively good shape. And I had a friend come over once and just absolutely start manhandling my comics. And I'm like, dude, stop. He's like, well, it's not like it's in mint condition. And I'm like, fuck you. Yeah, it's certainly not in crappy condition. I remember moving once and I had an entire painted like Greek army in a box, and one of the guys helping us move tipped the box on its side and just sent everything just sliding. And I got mad at him. And he's like, "It's just little dudes." I'm like, "Look, I've never wanted to hurt somebody so bad for something so dumb, but yeah, um, yeah, that, yeah, don't be that guy." For me, it's not. It has nothing to do with the chemicals. It could be the most natural thing in the world, and it's still going to bother me because it is the particles in the air. It's an allergic reaction, possibly partially asthmatic. I've never been diagnosed with asthma, but my youngest, who is biologically mine, has asthma and allergies. So very likely that they got that from me. Yay! Um, let's see. Anyways, let's see. Now we're delving into the biochemical aspects of tobacco. But yes, so we're at the hour mark, and interesting conversation for today. So I think we've kind of tackled the topic, and it was a lightweight topic to be sure. What am I doing hobby wise? Let's see. I did get around to finally actually backing Bear's heroic game. I've been watching his live plays for that and looking over the playtest doc, and I really like what he did with the Marvel superheroes game. I think it's a great update, and would genuinely classify it as an improvement. And that's coming from a standpoint of thinking that the Marvel superheroes RPG is probably one of the most perfect superheroes RPGs ever. There's a By the Sword game coming up tomorrow. Tonight is supposed to be Cody's game, and then tomorrow would be our By the Sword game. Let's see. Yes, for you it absolutely is. I've said it before that had I not been so turned off to the game by people's opinion, by the commentary I got on it constantly, Call of Cthulhu could very easily have been my number one game instead of D&D. But it wasn't until decades. I mean, my first time playing Call of Cthulhu was 7th edition, the current edition. And that was only after watching Seth Skorkowski's great videos, who dispelled a lot of the myths I had. Just the constant diatribe about it just being, oh, the characters always die or they always go insane. It was just a stupid meme that turned me off to the game so well. That's all anybody ever had to say it. But yeah, that game, I love running that game. I don't get to run it nearly as much as I would like to, but it certainly could have easily become my favorite game. My number one game. I would say right now it's probably still my favorite game to run, but I just don't get to run it as often. Again, I'm playing what I can play, not necessarily what I want to play. Let's see. Yeah, Korea also loves the game. There are, yeah, I think those are two countries where horror resonates differently. I think it's that slow creeping doom. If you look at Japanese horror cinema, it just dovetails with the Call of Cthulhu style. Yes, it's funny. Seth Skorkowski's channel has been around enough to where it's actually got imitators. There are a few other channels that have adopted him talking, uh, and doing the general narrative with like the black and white skit characters off to the side. There are actually I've now seen two other channels that do that. I'm like I don't remember ever seeing a channel do that before Seth Skorkowski. So he is not only is a two-time Annie Award winner, not only does he produce really good content, is he probably some of the most entertaining, but legitimately educational gaming content out there. But he's even a trendsetter now. And yes, I know this is This is Jen's favorite game. It was Call of Cthulhu, and I don't get to run it all that often. So let's see. Wife bait. Yeah. I'm not sure if that's the most flattering thing, John, but let's see. Oh, and because it's so timely, yesterday we did celebrate our 22nd anniversary, so it's seems timely that she would come in. She actually has been watching the streams for some time. She usually stays quiet, but I mentioned Call of Cthulhu, so she had to chime in, I'm sure. But no, it's it's. I think it's important to really engage in gaming as a whole. I am, I think, a bit remiss in that I don't feel that um, I play as many games as I probably should. And part of that is I almost feel like I'm holding time out for the games that I really want to play rather than playing the games that I have a chance to play. Um, uh, but yeah, it's I have a shelf full of games I want to play. I've mentioned a few of them. I want to run the Alien RPG. I have Righteous Blood, Ruthless Blades. If you're into wuxia, kung fu theater kind of stuff, that's a really good, solid game. And then there's the miniature side of things, which is also a whole bunch of stuff. Um, it's it's but there's time. I just have to balance things. Like I have a friend who is currently in 5 different D&D games. 5 different D&D games. One of them is a 2E game that's been running for 17 years. Last time I talked to him, so it's probably like 18 now. This is a man who has 3 children. A working wife. He himself works, and he's still managing to find time for 5 campaigns. I mean, no, I'm not one to balk. I mean, I'm currently running 2 and playing in a third, so you know, there is that. I mean, I was playing in 2, but I had to back out of Saxus's game to make room for my therapy appointments. But it's yeah. I mean, I don't know how people do it. John, I swear, John has made a deal with the devil, geek, because the man seems to have an infinite amount of time to play games. Still works and still has family time. So I'm pretty sure he's created some Lovecraftian ritual where he steals time from others. That way he can have extra time to game. So let's see what else we got here. Yeah, and I'd be curious what those misconceptions are. I'm betting they're the same as mine, where it's like all death and all going insane. Um, I would very much absolutely encourage anybody who runs into this similar problem with people in Call of Cthulhu is to guide them to Seth Gorkowski's page. Seth Gorkowski has a Call of Cthulhu playlist. All they need to do is listen to that and watch that and really see that there's somebody who really enjoys it. I would say more specifically, send them to his How to Play Call of Cthulhu 7th Edition playlist. It because it doesn't he does a lot of reviews which have a lot of spoilers for adventures. So if you're not a homebrew GM like me, it may screw it up. No, I think actually what the trick really is that he's managed to fool you all into thinking that you're playing just a game, but he's actually tied his ritual into the time that he's playing with you, and thus stealing time from you that he can then use himself. So There you go. Let's see. Yes, you're dying slowly. It's going to cost you because those rituals all cost. This is a good one. I mean, honestly, in many ways, yes, it is. The only difference is that at the end, when you pull the hood off of the monster, there's another monster underneath. Another good example. Um, let's see. But yeah, so my fifth edition campaign gens in the game, so I don't necessarily want to telegraph too much, and this is actually ultimately up to the other players. But I feel like it's reaching a natural stopping point, or at least a break point. They've been on a big quest for a while, and they've kind of sort of reached the end of it. They're still finishing it up, but so we have a decision to make for what we're going to play next, and we'll see what that is. Even if that's maybe just a mini campaign or just a couple of one-offs, one-shots. Who I don't know. Um, I have a player in my group who has made it very clear that if we're not playing 5e, he's not interested, and he'll just you know he'll bow out until we play fifth edition again. He's not being a jerk about it. He's just he doesn't have time to learn another game. Um, and that's fine. Um, let's see here. Yeah, speaking of which, uh, I mentioned it before, and I still have. I ran into my copy the other day, going through my printed PDF games. If you have kids that are wanting to learn the games, I hope it's still available out there. But look for a game called Meddling Kids. Meddling Kids is literally the RPG of Scooby Doo style game. It it is Scooby Doo. It is Jabberjaws. It's any of those Hanna Barbera, you know, teenagers plus oddball. They call it the mascot character in the game, and uh, it is designed as a teaching game for kids coming up in RPGs. It's not made for speed buggy. It's definitely a version. So, and I'm going to pitch the game again because honestly, I would love to play this game with adults because I feel like it's one of those games that while it's designed for kids, still has enough going on to where it would still be totally entertaining and fun playing. Um, um, in Meddling Kids, each of the players plays a teenager character, and they have a bunch of templates that you can just pick. So, that's your class. The mascot character is played by the GM, and it is done that way because if you ever remember any of those cartoons, the mascot character is the one who always finds ways, not always, but often finds ways to move the plot along when the gang is stuck. Scooby Doo walks in with a banana peel on his foot, and Shaggy's like, "Hey, Scoob, where'd you get the banana peel?" And over there, and they next thing you know, they find the cave with the gorilla that's been actually in the giant robot suit or whatever, and yeah, Captain Caveman. That's another good one, and or you're in the hallway and Scooby's complaining about or his feet being tired from doing so much walking, so he leans against the wall and flips around and there's a secret door. So in Meddling Kids, the GM plays the mascot character because remember it's designed for playing with kids. If the kids were ever to get stuck on the mystery, um, he just has the mascot character do something that moves the plot along. What's funny is that Call of Cthulhu 7th edition has a rule similar to this called the idea roll or the no roll. I can't remember exactly what it is. A lot of people call it the idea check. It's, I think, just a no roll. Um, and the idea in 7th edition, it's a great rule. I know a lot of older players kind of grumble and grognard over it, but um, I think it's a great rule because Call of Cthulhu can get a little call of, I almost said call of convoluted, uh, but it can get convoluted, with all the clues and things going on, especially if you're playing over multiple sessions and maybe your sessions happen very intermittently. Um, Later, man. Have a good one. Um, uh, but yeah, and with the no roll, the ideal roll, if the party ever gets stuck, the GM can call for them to make a check, and uh, it's never it's never a yes or no. It's the margin of success determines how complete a clue they get. Yeah, the only problem I have with Kids on Bikes is it's not enough of a game for my tastes. I have it. I backed it when it got made. Um, I was really psyched. Also, the fact that it's illustrated by the artist for Paper Girls is extra points. Um, but the the problem is the game is pretty light. It ends up being more of a storytelling game and less of a game. And I like my games gamey. And again, that goes back to playing the things that you like. You know, my brother and I kind of go back and forth on this. I feel like often in our discussions, I come across this kind of the old grognardy guy because I like my games to be mechanical in a certain way. Um, and I've been playing long enough and I'm interested in enough things to where I don't feel like I need a game that necessarily does a lot of the heavy lifting for me. So I like a game that that lets me do the deciding and the figuring and doesn't put a lot of mechanics in the way for me to do things. I don't mind skill rolls and I don't mind skill checks and stuff like that, but I don't feel like I have to have moves or special things in the turn phase and stuff like that. But anyways, yeah. Let's see. Mouse Ritter. Mouse Ritter looked pretty cool. It's funny how those all kind of came up because you have Mouse Ritter and then there was also what are the other ones? I can't remember. Um, but yeah, Mouse Ritter is fun. There's a game that I have that I've played that is I think a good one that I would like to play with more grown up folks too is Tales from the Wood. I mentioned it before. It's a game where you play non anthropomorphic animals doing amazing, um, going through adventures, kind of like Animals of Farthing Wood or Watership Down, stuff like that. I think that's a game that, while it appeals to kids, also takes on a new meaning when you're playing it with adults who kind of get the nuances of those stories. Can be fun. Yeah, those are also good. Um, what's funny is even in the comics universe, you had Mouse Guard, but then you ended up with Mice Templar as well, which is another game. Um, let's see. I I've been tempted to try to figure out a way to run a game. In my old campaign world, there was an entire subsect of one of the cities in my campaign. When I say my old campaign world, I mean the one I used to run back in the day, that I don't run in anymore. There was a city where there was an abandoned wizard's tower there, and in the sewers of that city was a kind of Rats of Nim kind of little city uh, of its own in the sewers where awakened animals lived. Most of them were small creatures, um, and the whole story behind that was that when the wizard had passed, died, gotten stuck in some dimension, whatever, for whatever reason, was no longer present in his tower. And over the years, centuries, however long it had been, the tower had just kind of gone to mildew, and his experiments and stuff that he had left behind kind of withered, and they kind of leached. He basically had magical toxic waste that got into the sewers. So basically, we had a secret of the use kind of a thing going on. And so we had all these awakened animals that came from there. And I had written up a bunch of NPCs, and they were all sort of guided by his old familiar, who was an owl. And so the he had started this community for them. Basically, like, it's not their fault that they were awakened. And over the course of play, basically discovered that the runoff from that city, that polluted city water, had gone off into the countryside. And so it was a matter of adventuring to find all these little communities of awakened animals that were starting to crop up out in the wilderness where this magical runoff had gone to. And then also the evil that was also after it. There was a were rat and his minions that were after it. Yeah, I haven't checked out Mouse Ritter. I have looked at Mouse Guard. Unfortunately, uses the burning wheel system, and I'm not there for that. Um, Mouse Ritter. There are a couple other games that have done that. The problem with most of the games that have animal characters is that they're usually just doing the anthro animal thing, where you're kind of assumed to be human sized and normal. Mouse Ritter, I'm not. Maybe you can tell me more about it, but are the animals assumed to be their normal sizes in Mouse Ritter? Um, and that was the problem I always had with trying to adapt it to D&D, because D&D scales up really well, monster size and capability, but it doesn't really scale down. So yeah, I mean, once you get down to a certain size in D&D, it just can't get any smaller and still interact with the world. The D&D system is not made for that style of play, because it's not designed to worry about things that are less than one hit die or anything like that, or at least to have them be important. So, yeah, it's definitely a game I might check out. What's the core system on that again? You said Dirty History and Hobbies. You want to just tag that in? I'll look it up later on. But is it you said it was based on another game? Um, but there is, it's the problem I have with running and playing more games is my schedule. So a lot of people are not available when I'm available. I have Monday and Tuesday off. I have a lot of time left on Mondays and Tuesdays because I'm home alone most of those days. So I could run games in the daytime, but who's available in the daytime on a Monday or a Tuesday? I'm sure I'm not the only one who has a weird schedule, but it's still an odd one. So, um, yeah. I am not familiar with Into the Odd. So I would imagine that you could take any of the small animal games and the small anthro animal games and rewrite them as Rescue Rangers. Or you could use the TMNT and other strangeness and just never buy steps of growth for your characters. And that way, your character already fits into a game system that's designed for human-sized stuff. Because if you start with if you make a mouse character in TMNT and other strangeness and don't spend any Bio E to get bigger, then you end up with just a regular mouse-sized character. So yeah, it's a good one. Redwall's another good one, another good example of the normal animal-sized critters. Although Redwall was really ambiguous in a lot of cases. Like when you read the first few books, it sounds like they're very much in a human world, but later on, it becomes a little less clear. Well, yeah, I mean, Rescue Rangers was Tiny Anthro, exactly. So if you're using TMNT, you could not, like I said, you could not spend the points to get bigger. Although at that point, you're playing a game system that's designed for you to be spending the BioE, and you're kind of leaving capabilities on the table. So it might be better to adapt something like Mouse Ritter or Mouse Guard or something. Let's see. Yeah, Secret of Nim and that whole uh, you know Disney Don Bluth kind of vibe that it had uh, was very much the inspiration for my little part of my campaign world. Yeah, sometimes the best game is not the game that you want to play, but the game that you can play, and that's one of the things I was saying earlier. I mean, it's like it reminds me of a quote I heard recently, and I'm maybe misquoting this correctly, but the price of perfection is prohibitive. Um, and I swear, if I was ever to get words tattooed on me anywhere, it would be that, because that is so much. It speaks so much to my ADHD and my project piles that never get finished. But also, I think when we're trying to look for and get into games, trying to find and or waiting for that perfect game is often going to keep you from gaming at all. It is a bear. Let's see. What's funny, actually, is if you think about Secret of Nim is, for all intents and purposes, right there in line with a TMNT style Eastman and Laird type of a story. It is animals being experimented on and being given abilities by strange chemicals and science. Um, you could, yeah, you could definitely. In fact, one of the ideas I had for a TMNT game once that never came to fruition was similar to what I just described for fantasy, but I had this idea that if the ooze got into the sewer system for, in the New York sewer system, there's going to be runoff somewhere, and if that runoff was out in some backwater, that there might be a little community of mutant animals that popped up, kind of like a little bayou or swamp town, whatever, um, or have another place where the ooze got out, and like maybe in Louisiana in the bayou, there's a little like funky little mutant town. Let's see. I think you're just quibbling over words there. Perfectionism, it expresses itself in many ways. For me, it expresses myself in the idea that I hesitate to I hesitate to start things because I fear that I cannot do them correctly, which is completely antithetical to ever getting good at anything because you have to make mistakes. There's a lot bottled up in there. There's a combination of my ADHD, um, which makes it hard to start projects, but also gets you hyper obsessed over doing things right. But there's also the economics of it. There's some socioeconomic baggage there as well. Um, Having grown up and often in my adult life not having enough money to afford mistakes keeps me from doing, like, I will go buy a bunch of craft materials, for example, or a bunch of project materials, for our like gaming terrain or whatever, and then often not build it because I get so worried that okay, well I had the money to buy it, but if I screw up the materials I have, I don't have the materials anymore, and I may not be able to purchase it. Even in situations where I am in a better position to be able to actually, repurchase those materials, it's so much a part of my baggage, my trauma, if you will, that it still makes me hesitate. Now add that to the ADHD, and it's a really potent mix. Let's see. Yeah, well, one thing I remember about Rescue Rangers too is I think that most of the animals in that world were to some degree intelligent. I can't remember; it's been a while. I was more of a Tailspin and Ducktales kind of guy. So Tailspin just appealed to me because it was, for all intents and purposes, it was pulp, and it was pulp adventure. One of my miniature projects I wanted to do is at one point is I wanted to, and this is not an original idea, but I saw somebody had done a series of miniatures that was all the characters from Wind of the Willows sculpted as very characterful humans of that time period. And that really inspired me to think about what if we were to do Tailspin miniatures, but all of those characters done as humans in their pulp costuming and stuff. Very cool. It was a project that I wanted to do. I have met Baloo at Disneyland. Baloo is also one of my favorites going back to as a kid because I got to my it was my grandfather who took me to see the Jungle Book in the theater, and uh, he would he would often sing the bare necessities. My grandfather was an amazing man. Went to see all the Star Wars movies with me, except for Return of the Jedi because I didn't get down to California that summer when it came out. But yeah, it's yeah, yeah. So Baloo has got a special place. Probably also why I like Tailspin. Um, let's see. Well, that's pretty hardcore. Um, Congratulations to you for making it work. Let's see. So we are at about the 15-minute mark, and then I'm going to have to get going. But I very much do appreciate everybody who showed up and had a part in the conversation. Uh, yeah, it was very much just Tales of the Gold Monkey. You're right. But I feel like in a lot of ways it went a lot further and actually succeeded more in capturing the pulp spirit than Tales of the Gold Monkey did, because Disney, A, has the money to throw behind their animation to make it happen. Also, animation allows them to do things that a TV show probably would never have been able to do. Let's see. It's interesting. And so I was mentally exercising with a friend of mine on basically adapting all of the TMNT wannabes into the TMNT universe and starting to try and stat them up. Biker mice and SWAT cats, and street frog, was it battle toads and street sharks and all that stuff. Um, Gummy Bears is one of those cartoons that I really liked when I was younger, and my buddy and I made up an RPG for it and then went so far as to like draw characters. We had this thing where we would end up making RPGs for any cartoon that we loved. We had GI Joe, we had Transformers, we had Thundercats, we had He-Man, we had all of those shows we had made games for, and we had kind of our own little universal system that we would adapt. It was based on a 1 to 10, not a percentile, but like just a 1 to 10 stat thing. But interesting thing, Marhockman, the game Tales from the Wood all the character options in there are non-anthro animals, um, except they do include the gnome. The gnome in there is depicted as more of like a 3 foot tall character, more like a D&D gnome, but I always play him as the classic David the Gnome character, and I only run him as an NPC. Don't allow players to run it to play him because then they get access to magic and stuff, and it just makes it a little less challenging in my mind. Having him be an NPC that they can go to or who can support them is much more effective, I think. Let's see. But yeah, the what was I saying? Oh yeah, gummy bear. My buddy and I were artists, or at least we fancied ourselves as such, and so we constantly. It's funny, the kids nowadays call them OCs, original characters, and I have to smile because my youngest was very much into that, and my oldest dabbled a bit, but my youngest was very much into that, including having submitted their original characters to I think Hasbro to for like they actually mailed in suggestions for Monster High dolls and stuff like that. They were super into it. But anyways, my friend and I would like make our own GI Joe characters, make our own Transformers characters, Thundercats, all of that, and then we would game with them. And so Gummy Bears was also one of those ones because we liked the cartoon and we drew the character. We would draw characters. It was really. It's actually why my file for Marvel is like this thick. It's because we enjoyed making characters as much as we enjoyed playing the game, and so we would just create new villains and heroes all the time, and we would illustrate them. It's super fun. But our Thundercats game was kind of cool because rather than just play new Thundercats, we decided that the cataclysm that hit Thundera also was affecting other worlds. And so each of us made our own lineup of other alien heroes that ended up on Third Earth. Um, we so he had like I think he had a hawk themed group of characters, and then I made a dragon based group of characters. Have a good one, man. Thank you for coming by. But yeah, when we did He-Man, it was kind of interesting too because rather than just make some NPC character, some side hustle guy and a guy who was like on the one of He-Man's friends, we each of us made because you had He-Man who was from Eternia, and then you had She-Ra who was from wherever I can't remember off the top of my head. We decided to make heroes from other similar worlds, basically creating a multiverse. So that was fun. Thunder Mustelids, Thunder Weasels. There you go, Thunder Weasels. And it works. It works with any animal, honestly, as long as there's enough representation in the species. You just have to play with it, and it's kind of based on the fact that the creators of Thundercats went on to do, Silverhawks and Tiger Sharks. You could just repeat. I don't know if there's anything that says that Mumra's from Earth, but possibly. Let's see. Rock and Roll is great. I remember that one. I don't remember the Devil and Daniel Mouse though. But yeah, it's there is a lot of if any of the games I have suggested here or talked about here really is something that you would like to try playing, go over to the Elfbait Discord, and there are departments there for various categories or just in general chat, and start talking about them. If I can get players for other games, even if it's just one-offs, I would love to run it. I mean, I mentioned it before, but Tales from the Wood as a GM is a really fun game to write for, because you're writing from a perspective that you don't often get to write from. You're not writing for magical anthro animals. You're not writing for mutant animals. You're not writing for space aliens, or you're writing for non-anthro animals. These animals, for all intents and purposes, are exactly what they are in the real world, with the idea that there's an intelligence to animals that we get to play through, just like in Watership Down or the Animals of Farthingwood or Cold Moons or any of those similar genre books. Warriors, if your kids were into that, where it's all about the feral cats. Firewing, I think, was a series about a bat, a colony of bats. There was so you're very much. I hope that was your barking dog, not my barking dog being a problem. Sorry about that. It's very challenging to write for that, and it's interesting because you have to come up with, when you're writing things for these adventures, how the animals perceive them and what kind of NPC interactions you would have. For example, one scenario I wrote for Tales from the Wood, and I'm sure I've mentioned this before, involved a ghost story where an animal was killed by a ghost, and the ghost was actually a plastic shopping bag that had been floating around freely in the trees and had been glimpsed through the moonlight, tangled in the trees and ruffling and stuff. And yeah, where I lived, there was a store chain, and you may know of it depending on where you live, called Safeway. And so their symbol is a kind of a big round red S, and in the moonlight backlit, it might look like a single red eye. And so I kind of went with that. And so the animals were all up in arms over this ghost that had killed an animal in the woods. And so they went adventuring, and they were trying to find information, because in Tales from the Wood, there's this concept of the bane and the way. The way is the natural way, and the bane is kind of the corruption of man and pollution. So if you need to find out stuff about the bane, you will often go find creatures that are associated with the bane, and one of those creatures is the rats. So in that adventure, the players had to go to the rats, and they found the rats on the side of the road eating from a styrofoam takeout container, and some discarded beer cans that were on the side of the road. And you write all this stuff in that's in a totally different perspective, because your characters don't have hands. Their perception is filtered through that of the real world. And then when you start factoring in the bane and kind of the corruption it has, you can come up with interesting scenarios. Like one scenario I had written, a lot of these I haven't been able to play, but one scenario I wrote was there was a frog that had now fancied himself a king, who was damming up the river, the stream. They call it a river, but it's a stream, to make a bigger spot for him and his frogs, thus depriving the rest of the wood of the water that they needed. And so, that frog had been corrupted by the bane and was acting unnaturally. I had written another scenario where there was a friendly veterinarian who had moved into one of the local farmsteads, and the animals were terrified of it, because in my stories there was always some like high-strung squirrel who was like the quest giver, because he was like always going around getting nosy and like freaking out over things. And so like this squirrel had seen that inside this man's house, he's got animals pinned to his wall, and in jars and stuff like that, because he's a veterinarian, he's a doctor, he's got his samples and his anatomy. And what they didn't realize is that this man was actually their friend, and they would have to discover that through play. But yeah, it's one of those games where I feel like playing it with kids is great, but playing it with adults would just be a totally different set of nuance. Let's see. That is a wizard goose in the background. If you have not heard the tale of the wizard goose, I will spend the last 5 minutes telling the tale of the wizard goose. So my best friend from back in Washington, him and I have this thing going, and he likes to prank people, and we're just usually just giving each other a lot of shit. So there have been two ceramic geese in my life. The first one was an ordinary goose that I came out to work one day and was in the passenger seat of my car. And that came and went, and it was funny. And that goose went into my garden. This guy in the background, hat, cape, and all, um, and I believe he originally had a little badge that said I cast fireball or something like that. Um, um, but that is gone. This guy showed up on my gaming table in my locked game room. That was a shed outside behind a shed is basically a workshop behind the house that we were living in at the time. Showed up on my game table and lived out there, very proudly displayed as part of my life and part of my character. Now, when we moved to St. Louis, I had to triage a lot of stuff, and unfortunately, he was one of the things that I decided we didn't have space for. Kind of sad. I didn't like leaving him behind. Anyways, a year after we moved here, I come downstairs to my office where I'm sitting now, and he's in my chair. And it was so weird for me. I was like, we left this guy behind. How is he here? And so I was so taken aback that I ran upstairs and was looking out in my driveway. Did my buddy like show up? Was he here? Did he drive out? Did he road trip here? Because I didn't think he would put it in luggage. I went to our guest room, and he come in late at night and like, haha, sneaky, sneaky. No, him and my wife had conspired to have her secret into, somehow she got it into the stuff that we had packed in our pod when we had moved. And I never noticed it. And she had held onto it in secret for a year until she could place it. And it was so well played. There's a reason we've been married for 22 years. But yeah, between the two of them, they just played that off so well. And so, yes, he's there. He managed to end up here. He, again, he wasn't late. He arrived exactly when he intended. But that is the Wizard Goose. When I revived my channel, I almost actually had the Wizard Goose be my voice, kind of like Sean does with his Mage's Musings. And if I could ever pull it off, I'd put the Wizard Goose on one of his episodes. But I actually thought about trying to make a Muppet style puppet for the Wizard Goose after started watching the Puppet Nerd channel on YouTube, because he has some really good instructionals. But that's going too far, and I don't want to steal Sean's shtick there. That's his thing. Yeah, Wizard Goose. All right, guys. Well, that brings us to 11:45, which is when I got to call it. It's when I turn into a pumpkin here. Again, thanks for coming out, everybody who did. And as always, do hope you took something away from this. I'm not one of those guys who's going to tell you the 10 best ways to play the such and such. I like to talk about just enjoying the hobby. I would rather demonstrate gaming stuff. But still doing the zine thing. I haven't had a lot of people chime in with any contributions for that. But I may just release issue 0 as my thing and show people that it's actually a thing. If you can feel like volunteering anything like layout or a piece of art or cover or anything like that, happy to take that. Articles are always appreciated. Even if it's just a monster write-up or a magic item write-up or something like that, an encounter. All of that stuff is good, but I'm going to end it there, and hopefully you guys all have a chance to get out and game, and I will see my By the Sword folks tomorrow, and hopefully we're playing Cody's game tonight. Have a good one, folks.